No, that's fine. We'll just stand here and tag team.
We're just going to record ourselves and we'll post this up on our website. We're going to record this and post this on our website. It's just recording us, not anybody there. Okay?
There we are.
There's nothing here.
Oh, sorry, that's the one we used for the Democrats.
Oh.
Are we cute or what? Huh?
We tried. This is Colonel William O'Brien.
This is Kimberly Dvorak. We're known as KD and the Colonel. And hence you see the little cards on the tables. I told you we were cute, right?
Okay, we'd like to start off. Today is 9/11. America was attacked by Al-Qaeda 16 years ago. And today we're still under attack, but from an unprecedented power granted to the federal government and their agencies to conduct warrantless spying on Americans, empowering the deep state beyond capability or oversight. Nothing Edward Snowden said about government spying and illegal collection of information was untrue. Instead of being hailed a hero, he sits in prison in Moscow, a stateless person. So that brings us to today's presentation.
And this has not been choreographed, I want you to know. President Trump has been identified as a clear and present danger by the establishment, the lobbyists, the special interests, the deep state, the social media, and the press, collectively known by us as the swamp creatures. President Trump's mantra to drain the swamp, build the wall, and lock her up has placed him in direct conflict with formidable foes residing in the swamp. So whether or not you support President Trump, if you're a constitutionalist, you should be alarmed at the coordinated assault on the office of the presidency. So today we would like to present some trends that we believe put the very foundation of our government and society at risk.
So let's get started. We have a lot to cover in just 3 hours. Just kidding. We've placed some cards on the tables. If you have a question, please jot it down, and at the end of the presentation, we'd be happy to answer questions.
And the gentleman in the red hat, Don, put your phone number down.
You may have also noticed some Chinese takeout boxes on the table. I think the gentleman over here opened them up early. We would like to discuss that after the presentation, so hang on just a bit. Now, where do you go? Where are you going?
I was afraid you might be thirsty.
Oh, good grief. Okay. There you go.
As a bit of background, as most of you know, the swamp, also known as the U.S. government, spends about $4 trillion a year. After the European Union, China, the U.S., and India, the United States government is the 5th largest economy in the world. Even former Senator Sam Nunn would agree that's real money. There are millions of individuals and businesses living the life fed by the swamp. So here's the rub. President Trump said he would drain the swamp and eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government. To Washington's establishment, that's heresy.
The fact that the establishment is opposed to draining the swamp should come as no surprise. But what is surprising is the danger is the opposition has coalesced into a unified opposition. The opposition includes the left, the right, the bureaucracy, the deep state, the fringe, social media conglomerates, the media, and the military-industrial complex. Take Charlottesville, for example. The KKK and the alt-left went to Charlottesville for a showdown. They had guns, they had bats, gas masks, shields, helmets. Usually, people like us, if we remember the Tea Party, we bring homemade placards and signs. So when President Trump condemned the violence, he said both sides were to blame. for the violence. Opposition, through their compliant media, translated the president's remarks into support for the KKK. That strained the interpretation for weeks.
Today, the opposition is attacking the very foundational institutions of the Constitution, namely free speech and free press. We have categorized their battle plan as speech, spying, and spending. The opposition uses hate and PC speech and ridicule to eliminate opposition to their agenda. Anyone who dissents from the message of the left is immediately branded as a racist, an anti-Semite, or an LGBTQ as a means of eliminating dissent. Fake news is another compelling means of destroying lives and reputations. Who would possibly want to serve with President Trump knowing they will be subjected to fake news to discredit and ridicule their willingness to serve their country? Trump's lawyer, his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, was alleged to have met with agents of the Russian government in Prague. He had to produce his passport and calendar to prove he wasn't there. Likewise, Carter Page, Roger Stone, Corey Lewandowski, and Paul Manafort have had to fight off fake news stories themselves. And General Flynn, Kimberly interviewed General Flynn at the convention in Cleveland, and that's also posted, I think, on our website, the full interview. We'll talk more about General Flynn in just a few minutes.
The opposition is working to separate President Trump from his support base, the people he trusts, in order to isolate him. So let's look at the establishment's egregious tactics so far. The appointment of former FBI Director Bob Mueller as special counsel to investigate the Trump campaign for collusion with the Russians and an obstruction of justice for the firing of James Comey. So how did these allegations arise? Where did they come from? Sounds like the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. But this is much easier to solve, and I'm an investigative journalist. So.
Candidate Trump mentioned jokingly, we thought, that if the Russians had Hillary's 30,000 missing emails, he'd sure like to see them.
Maybe he was just really seeking, Hillary Clinton's yoga instructor. He's a little chubby.
Trump's statement was a gift to the Dems to deflect the issues they were fighting throughout the campaign and the election. If you'll recall,
Hillary Clinton's private email server was headline news at the time, and she was charged with mishandling classified information.
Podesta's hacked email account. And if you recall how it was hacked, some spammer wrote to him and said, "You need to change your password, send it to me." So he did.
He did. You can't make this up. There were leaks about Bernie getting hosed over by the DNC, and that resulted in Debbie Wasserman Schultz from resigning as the head of the DNC.
And of course, memory lane, let's talk about Donna Brazil's handoff to President or candidate Clinton, the presidential debate questions.
And most recently, we have the Awan brothers. Their laptop was recently found, and they were the IT provider for Ms. Wasserman Schultz as well. And we're learning a lot more about that information, as we progress.
So faced with all of these issues, the Dems took a great leap forward and took an offensive that charged the Trump campaign had colluded with the Russians to affect the outcome of the election.
So to lend credibility to the Russian collusion storyline, the former President Obama leaked information from NSA wiretaps that General Flynn, soon to be Trump's NSA and short-lived advisor, had telephone conversations with the Russian ambassador, Mr. Kislyak. Reports suggested that Samantha Powers or Susan Rice of Benghazi fame leaked the information by unmasking General Flynn, an American citizen against whom no warrant had been issued.
The leaks and unmasking of an American citizen without having obtained a warrant first are violations of federal law. Neither has been investigated, despite the fact the NSA disclosed to the Obama administration that there had been no quid pro quo between General Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak. And despite that fact, the Obama administration leaked that information to the press to suggest that here is the collusion that we've been telling you about. Right here, it's on a wiretap, General Flynn talking to the Russians. Subsequently, Flynn was fired by Trump, and so now the collusion story has real legs. To further bolster the Trump-Russian collusion story, our own Senator John McCain delivered the so-called Steele dossier to FBI Director Comey.
Let's discuss that Steele dossier for a moment. Apparently, an anti-Trump faction commissioned by Fusion GPS to prepare the dossier during the GOP primary. Senator John McCain hand-carried that to the FBI director in December or January of this year. Mr. Stanley at Fusion GPS refused to tell Congress investigators who was specifically commissioned to authorize this report. There have also been reports now that the FBI itself has funded, in portion, that report. The FBI itself, under the director, James Comey.
So Fusion GPS hired a former British intelligence officer, Steele, to compile the dossier. Fusion completed the dossier and delivered it to Fusion. Apparently, it was leaked to several news agencies that rejected it as being unauthenticated, and basically it stretched credibility. But BuzzFeed, news outlet, did publish it, and it now is engaged in a civil lawsuit with one of the other persons named in the dossier. It's also been reported that Fusion GPS then sold the dossier to the Dems for use in the general election.
Yeah. Let's digress a bit here and discuss former FBI Director James Comey. The exploits of the former U.S. Attorney General and FBI Director are pretty well known. Comey held a press conference during the presidential campaign that set forth a long litany of violations relating to the handling of classified material by Hillary Clinton and her
And when
staff.
we were listening to that, I said to Blondie, I said, he's going to indict her. This is incredible. The presidential nominee of the Democrats is going to be indicted. He went through this long list of this is the law, this is what she did, this is the law, this is what she did. And then
said there was insufficient evidence to charge her with anything.
no prosecutor would take this case to a jury. Reports have recently surfaced that Comey had written Hillary Clinton's exoneration statement prior to interviewing her, or her staff members, to whom he also granted immunity for their testimony, which thereby taints any further prosecution against them in the future. Comey then held a second press conference where he announced the FBI had found Hillary's missing emails on disgraced Congressman Anthony the Wiener. Strike that. Anthony Weiner. The computer that he shared with Huma Abedin.
Comey then met with President-elect Trump several times during the transition, where he admittedly advised Trump that he was not under investigation by the FBI. He also made notes that he did not trust President and admittedly leaked this classified FBI information to the press. In fact, he orchestrated it to ensure that this would set forth a new special counsel to the, looking into the Trump administration. So President Trump lost confidence in Comey after that, and he consulted with his Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, on firing Comey. According to the reports, Comey had worked with Steele previously to the FBI and paid him to work on the dossier. Comey then met with President-elect Trump to give him a heads up about the dossier. You can't make this up. Trump denounced it as a complete fabrication and that he'd never been to Moscow.
Let's talk about the appointment of the special counsel. This is the sort of stuff, we've laid all this foundation out, and most of you know, But until we actually put this all together in one place, it's so staggering to us when you look at the trends. And so what we want you to do is appreciate the trends that we're trying to show you, and then we'd like to talk at the end about the impact that is. So for just a moment, let's look at how we got to the special counsel situation. This was the first success that the establishment had against, as Blondie calls him, Teflon Don Trump. I mean, nothing, the crotch grabbing, the racist comments, none of that stuff stuck because people believed in the resonance of his message. But this time, they were able to get a special counsel appointed and what was the reason for the special counseling? For alleged collusion by the Trump campaign with the Russians, and whether firing Comey was an obstruction of justice. Now, as Kimberly just mentioned, President Trump met with the Assistant Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, to review his options with regard to firing Comey. And the Assistant Attorney General said, I concur with you in firing Comey. In fact, he wrote the letter, the termination letter for Comey. Then he turns around and hires a special counsel. So after a third meeting with the president, Comey, Trump sought to fire him, and as I mentioned, he consulted with him, and the letter was written. The sad thing here is that the president sought out his attorney because Jeff Sessions had recused himself, and we'll talk about that in a moment. He sought out the advice of his counsel, says, can I fire this clown? This guy's really bothering me. Oh, yeah, you can fire him, and I agree. Then one of the charges for the special counsel that Rosenstein appointed was whether or not that constitutes obstruction of justice. Yeah. So Rosenstein and perhaps Comey convinced Attorney General Sessions to recuse himself from any involvement in the Russian collusion investigation, as he himself had met with the Russians.
Well, and if we remember that during the convention, it was a meeting that was set up that triggered the Sessions recusal, was a meeting held in Cleveland that the Obama administration had set up with the Russian ambassador Kislyak. So the Obama administration set this up, and in essence, I think they were playing both sides. In case Hillary didn't win, they wanted to have something, and they knew everybody kind of knew where Trump was going when he was going to appoint some of his cabinet members. So this was thought out well before the election took place, and this is where I think a lot of people they don't realize how the media can play into this and write the script for a lot of this was written prior to the election if you go back and read reports.
But if you note the trends in these things, you know how these things happened. We had the Hillary Clinton exoneration before she was ever interviewed. We have the advice from the Assistant Attorney General that you can fire Comey. That's there. Then we have the Russians meet with Jeff Sessions, which he doesn't even recall. He said it was a passing meeting going into the wherever it was they were going. It was just, hi, how are you? Good to meet you, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So the thing that should be most disconcerting to us is that the special counsel's commission tagged on this piece of obstruction of justice, and that was written by the Assistant Attorney General when he hired Bob Mueller to be the special counsel. That should be very disconcerting to us.
And let's all keep in mind that Mr. Rosenstein still has his job over at DOJ, which should be another concern, that this is someone who clearly orchestrated this, and once Sessions recused himself, it was 2 weeks until that firing of the letter came out and Bob Mueller was actually hired. So this stuff was put in place and orchestrated at DOJ.
And you can see from the reaction of the president, he had no notice that Sessions had intended to recuse himself. He had no idea that they were appointing a special counsel. None of that was provided to him. I promise you he would have fired both of them on the spot before any of this took place. Because as you can recall, at that time, the press and members of the Congress were demanding that they appoint a special counsel, and the president and the Republicans refused over and over and over again to do that. And then this thing orchestrated unbelievably cleverly
Yeah.
to put this thing into place.
Yeah. And also, let's remember that Bob Mueller was a former FBI director himself, and he was a few weeks earlier turned down by the Trump administration to be the FBI director to replace Comey. So he lost the job in essence twice.
So what is the irony of that? You're going now to investigate the guy that wouldn't give you the job?
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. It's just, the facts are there. Mueller was also hired by AG Rod Rosenstein to investigate the Trump campaign and obstruction of justice, especially when you look at what Hillary was accused of, and everybody seems to have forgotten their collective, that she lost 30,000 emails, that it's astounding that weeks and mere months into the Trump administration, they find time to get a special counsel. There were no calls for that when Hillary was running and when all of this was found out. So, why now? Why is this so important? And let's also keep in mind that Comey worked with Mueller when he was director at the FBI, and Comey actually referred to Mueller as his mentor. So now you have a guy that's going to be investigating the president for firing a guy that's the guy's mentor, who happens to, have the revolving door there in the FBI.
We're not making it up.
We're not making it up.
Just giving it to you.
Yeah. So, and other interesting facts about Mueller, he was supposed to investigate the collusion with the Russians, including the clear implications that the FBI was involved with the Steele dossier itself. Mueller also immediately hired at least a dozen attorneys to assist him. All were Hillary Clinton contributors. All. Mueller also gained fame by leading wrongful charges against Stephen Hartfield and Richard Jewell in the anthrax and Atlanta bombing cases, despite sketchy evidence, which resulted in the government paying multi-million-dollar settlements to the men. Mueller said he'd do it again. And remember, this is the guy that's investigating President Trump.
He's one of those guys, I'm going to get my man. He thinks he's a Royal Canadian Mountie, I guess. I'm going to get my man regardless of what it takes. So I wanted to just talk for just a couple of minutes about the real concerns I have about what's going on now with the special counsel, because it is, as Blondie has pointed out a number of times, this is not a special prosecutor, it's a special counsel. What they're looking into is the potential collusion of foreign governments in the American election. And so it's not classified as a criminal investigation, it's more like an administrative investigation. So here are the concerns that I have. A common prosecutorial tactic, easy for me to say, in a criminal indictment is to take a confederate or co-defendant or co-criminal and offer leniency for testimony against the bigger fish. We know that, all the time. They do that in the mafia and every other case. If they can get one guy to talk, they give him a deal and the other guy goes down. But here, there's no criminal indictment. There's no criminal indictment. So what is it that you defense against if you're the attorneys for these people who keep getting called into these revolving interview situations? There's no crime against which to defend. If there's a crime, you have laws and legal precedents and cases that you assert to protect your client's rights. That's not present here. Mueller is on a fishing expedition, and the president is right about that. Trying to get one of Trump's insiders caught up in some kind of illegality or something that's questionable and throw them a lifeline. Say, here's the deal. You may have some problems here, and I don't think you want us to go public with that. So here's the deal, you start talking. That is a common tactic in criminal investigations. This is not a criminal investigation. This is a civil investigation, and the right to these individuals obtaining protective orders to protect themselves against the investigation by the special counsel are very, very limited. Mueller's tactic is to sort through the transactions of these guys. Remember, a lot of these guys are billionaires. And Howard Hughes said once when they said, how much money do you have? He said, if you know how much you have, you don't have very much. Well, these guys have a lot of money and a lot of interest, and they probably couldn't tell you what they have. And so for the special counsel to be going through transactions that are completely unrelated to anything to do with Russia, looking for something to use as a tag to flip somebody, is so contrary to the idea of confrontational law in America. You have the right to confront your witness. That's a Sixth Amendment right. You have a Fourth Amendment right to be protected against producing evidence that may make you guilty. There's all sort of things, there are warrants by courts. There is no judge supervising this special counsel. May have jumped onto yours. So.
No, that's okay. He's an attorney, so we let him kind of, he knows a little bit about this. There you go. Carry on.
Yeah, right, very well. But going after Trump's close confidence and family, Mueller is trying to separate Trump from his support base, the people he trusts. He certainly doesn't trust Washington. He doesn't trust the swamp. He trusts his family and the people around him. And think about what Mueller and the press have been doing in their attacks. Let me just throw a few names at you. Flynn, Lewandowski, remember he beat up some reporter, ends up getting fired, and they were saying there was no case. Manafort, Bannon, Ross, Kushner, his own son Barron, and even his wife Melania was criticized for wearing heels on Air Force One going to Houston. She can wear heels anywhere as far as I'm concerned. And then Kellyanne Conway was criticized because she said that Ivanka Trump's line of shoes were really nice and she would buy them. The president even had to dissolve 2 business advisory committees that he had appointed that were helping him to bring jobs back to America because the uproar over Charlottesville was causing these people a lot of consternation. So he dissolved these committees so they wouldn't have to confront these accusers saying you're supporting a racist.
Even worse, there's no check and balance here as to Mr. Mueller's power. There's no judge, as William has stated, and his actions are trying to get Congress, they're trying to get him to fire Bob Mueller because now that will create a new storyline, and why would you fire somebody if you're innocent? The media plays along with this every single day. Mueller has also recently reached out to New York Attorney General Schneiderman, and
that's not New York is enough.
Okay.
Schneiderman,
okay. As well as the IRS, in order to make additional state charges available to coerce a target to turn and receive leniency, as a presidential pardon does not apply. A presidential pardon does not apply to state charges. So recently, President Trump pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and a lot of people, myself included after speaking with Sheriff Joe, this was a message to those that are being investigated by the left and Mr. Mueller that, look, I've got your back. Don't worry. Before the sentence is out, I've got your back. You're not Scooter Libby to me. I'm going to take care of you.
Let me just address one thing about Sheriff Joe, because there's a huge lot of a bunch of misunderstanding about it. Sheriff Joe was attacked by the federal government, the United States Department of Justice, for enforcing immigration laws that are on the book. Law enforcement doesn't have the right to select what's right or what's wrong. When I sit as a judge, I have guys come. We had one guy came in and he got charged because he drove over a fire hose that had water in it. Now, here I'm the judge, and I never even heard of the violation of driving over a charged fire hose because it could cause the fireman to fall off the ladder if the thing, jerked. I mean, it makes sense, but I never heard of it. But there's so much stuff out there that people don't understand. We don't pick and choose the laws. We have what's called the rule of law. The law applies to everyone. And so what the United States Department of Justice did, they went in federal court against the state of Arizona, and they said, we are revoking your concurrent jurisdiction to enforce immigration law. Law enforcement has a right to enforce federal and state law. if something happens and it's a state thing, they'll just take them and turn them over to the federal authorities. The United States Justice Department specifically forbade Sheriff Joe and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office from enforcing federal immigration law. So,
I'd like to just intervene here quickly. Sheriff Joe was denied a trial by his peers. They circumvented his actual constitutional right, and also it's important to note here that the federal government went after Sheriff Joe 2 days after the Obama administration was inaugurated. So 2 days, on the second day, President Obama then said, we're going after that guy, Sheriff Joe, and they did so relentlessly for 8 years.
I couldn't want you to go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, so in fact, back to the pardoning. I mean, President Trump pardoned him because he was orchestrating. He was telling everybody out there that, look, I'm going to play hardball, and I'm going to protect my guys. And so that's, I think, reassuring to those who are getting interrogated in essence by an out-of-control Justice Department and Special Counsel office.
But also send a message to the others, including Mueller, that you better get some state charges too, because if we come down here with charges in only federal court, Trump is liable to pardon them, and then those things will go away.
Yeah. So very contemptuous, for the law, for the rule of law in this country. Also, Congress today discussed passing a bill that would prohibit President Trump from firing the special counsel. And now I don't know where they come up with something like that, unless it's just the swamp looking at the president saying, it doesn't matter what you do, we're going to stop you at every turn. It seems that's what's happening. Everything he does, Congress, his own party, is looking into things and saying, look, you're not going to get away with anything. It's also an unprecedented assault on the president and the people around him based on flawed and false allegations of this Russian collusion. There's been no proof. And what the establishment is so desperate to hide. Why are they going after the president? What do they have to hide? And I'm talking about the left and the right here. What is in there that they're trying to fight? President Trump's not a politician. He's a businessman. He doesn't know the polite courtesy rules, and he doesn't know how you're supposed to handshake. He's the guy that says, this is what I need to do, and I'm going to get it done. And I tell you that when you look at what's going on, it's a travesty. The president's not even allowed to do his job as president. Would this have stood under President Obama? I mean, you didn't hear a peep out of the DOJ or any of his enemies. That nobody spoke. Everybody sat.
William or Holden was held in contempt by the Congress and was never prosecuted.
There were no investigations into Debbie Wasserman Schultz, IT guy. The Awan brothers were in this country. They're Pakistani. They're half the family's back in Pakistan now, and the IT people. And this is nowhere to be seen on the mainstream media. This is a bigger story than anybody even thinks about it. We talk about Benghazi. Everybody in this room knows when you say that word, it's eye roll, please, because okay, it's over and done with. But this is bigger than that. This IT guy had access to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He sat in her as her capacity to sit on these intelligence committees. And there's been allegations by the military itself that the first mission that President Trump authorized that caused an ambush that killed 2 Navy SEALs, that information was actually presented to Congress in one of these IT meetings that this Awan brother was the IT coordinator of. So this guy most likely was giving the information, allegedly giving the information back to Pakistan and the ISI. So this is a much bigger story. This is a story that encompasses the Democrat Party, but you do not see this in the mainstream media whatsoever. Yet we continue to hear day to day what President Trump did badly and how he spoke and his tweet and all of these things. These are all deflection. This is all deflection, and the bigger stories are under there. And unfortunately, we have a very compliant media.
Just mention one thing about the ownership of the computer, how the ownership changed.
Yeah. First of all, Debbie Wasserman Schultz went into the Capitol Police once this laptop in question was found in a phone booth in one of the congressional buildings by the Capitol Police, and in it they had the ID of the Awan brothers, the Pakistani ID. They had their driver's licenses, so there was no question as who it was. Wasserman Schultz went to the Capitol Police, and most people in this room probably know, threatened the Capitol Police, saying there is going to be consequences because you won't give me back my computer. The FBI tried to get it. She would not release it to the FBI. And now all of a sudden that they tried logging in and it says, it's Debbie Wasserman Schultz's computer. She's like, nope, that's not mine. I forgot. That was his computer, not mine. So again, evolving stories, but it never gets written. They always write the very first part of the story and they always leave out conveniently the second half that provides all the context in this.
All right, since we got a curtain call notice here, let me try to wind this up. The establishment and deep state use the media, the courts, PAC money in a coordinated effort to overthrow President Trump. They use the NSA and the intel community to leak embarrassing or false information, yet there are no convictions. When General Flynn was unmasked, there was no investigation. The information can only come from a few places. Only a few people have that information. And we know that only 2 people are the suspects right now for having unmasked him. But as an American citizen, incidentally captured in a recording involving a foreign citizen, he is entitled to certain protections. Nothing has been done to protect him or to prosecute those who did that. Now, one of the areas that really should be concerning to all of us is social media. Social media today, I believe, is like a utility. You're entitled, you've got to have a phone, you've got to have power, you've got to have cable TV and those things to even to operate in today's world. Social media is censoring the users of social media, and they're censoring the content. For example, there you are. Yeah. When we did your show up in Ramona, because Kimberly's name didn't appear on the top, it showed up right off the top. If you did a Google search, it would show up that she was here because it was talking about the Republican women. If you looked up her name right now, all you would find is negative Google reports from many, many years ago, all of which have since been rebuked or shown to have been true. She has never recanted or withdrawn a single story in all the time that she's been reporting. Yet the media is using social media. Corporations are using social media. And for example, we talked about before, Nordstrom dropped Ivanka Trump's line because they don't agree with the president. These are dangerous things that are going on, ladies and gentlemen, because when you take something like social media is not subject to the Bill of Rights. As you know, the Bill of Rights applies between the government and individuals. So if you're on Google and they say, you're off Google, you're off Twitter, we don't like your message, that's okay. There's nothing we can do about that. Yeah. So we need to take a strong look at saying, and I'm not a big regulation guy, believe me, I'm a strict constructionist guy. But social media, I believe, has moved into the realm of being a utility that should be provided equal access to everyone.
Well, and you're also seeing right now that there's an effort by Steve Jobs, his former wife, trying to purchase Twitter so they can kick President Trump off Twitter. I mean, this is how far they're trying to take it. And that's where we need to focus our attentions, because once it becomes a livelihood issue with people, it's complete censorship.
All right, let me just wind this up for us. One of the things a couple of takeaways here, and then we're out of here. People always ask us when we speak, what is it we can do? And there are a couple of things. One is easy. Carefully vet any candidates for your party and say, are these people committed to the rule of law and the United States Constitution? That's the first question. There's no conflict with that if you're an American citizen. We don't have a royal family like the Spanish when the fascists were passed over and Franco left to bring back a royal family. The only thing we have in this United States between us and anarchy is the Constitution of the United States. If we don't like it, we have the right to change it. But the way it is now is the way it has to be enforced, because that is the rule of law, and that's all we have.
Yeah. And end the silent majority. Merely
This is big.
Yeah, merely voting is not enough. You know, because of social media and the fake news in general. You've got to get out and
Get involved.
get involved.
March, march, march. It's good for your cardiovascular, but it's also going to be good for your political persuasions, because the American people need to see other people out there doing something, because if we just sit back, the social media is going to continue to drum this thing into young people's minds, and now all they're going to do is keep believing that stuff. It's incredible. We're at Phoenix, and I'll promise this is it. In Phoenix, Kimberly interviewed a half dozen people. It was really funny. They had the really nice signs, clever little things and all that stuff. They had no clue what they were there for. We asked certain questions. They don't understand. They're looking for something to be a part of. You've got to do a lot of recruiting, a lot of hard work. You've got to bring those people into the fold and let them understand this is bigger than everything else we're doing.
And I'll conclude by saying that in Phoenix, it was a big eye-opener. Obviously, we're 8 months into this new administration, and the enthusiasm was incredible. There were 20 to 30,000 people who were waiting in a line that seemingly went around the entire downtown area in 110-degree heat. And yet when they knew that they weren't going to get into the event, they all got out their cell phones and watched the rally on their cell phones. They stayed in line, even though they knew they were not going to get in the building. And people in the media, they did not report this. This is what the left is afraid of, the enthusiasm. When you go and talk to the people who are actually working hard, the middle class, who are tired and not getting a break, those are the people that they're scared of. And they rightly so, because these people had incredible enthusiasm for this president.
We stood in line with those people and marched around and around for 3 hours, knowing we weren't going to get in. We're going, that's okay, this is cool. Anyway, all right, thanks very much.
Hold on. And also, you guys can open the Chinese boxes there that we left. I forgot to tell you that we've been recording everything at your table, so hopefully nobody said anything that they don't want their neighbor to know about. I'm the media. No, they're just candy for everybody. Just to make a point, you never know when you're going to be recording.
Thank you very much.
Take a couple questions.
Yeah. We'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has questions. Oh.
At ease.
Yeah. Well, I think that, moving forward, they will be. I think last night I watched 60 Minutes to see what Steve Bannon had to say. And it was actually really incredible. Within 2 days, they said that they were going to embrace the establishment because they needed their help, and they thought that they were, that they were genuine and they were welcoming the Trump administration into Washington, D.C. I think that has been blown out of the water. I think that you're going to see things change in a maybe perhaps a little slower way, but I think you're going to see Steve Bannon leading the charge on this and trying to get this out there, because it's becoming more and more apparent that the swamp or the deep state, the political class that resides in Washington, D.C. is not going to cooperate.
Whose side is Jeff Sessions on? Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Why is he doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is he doing it?
Well, I think he's also very polite. I've interviewed him several times, and he's a very polite person. He's Southern, and he's a good guy. If he can withstand and not be booted out, then he will do very good things. But right now, he's fighting against the establishment and the media, and that's a very hard thing to do. And I think people, we ought to be supporting him and letting them know that we are backing him. Yeah.
And one thing also keep in mind, the president has 3,000 or 4,000 appointments to run all of these federal agencies. The president has appointed fewer than 1,000 people, and the Senate has not been confirming him.
Yeah.
So all these people that are working out there are holdovers from the prior administration.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that Mueller's investigation is going to find more dirt on Hillary?
I don't think they're looking at Hillary, and I think what you're going to see is they're going to say, well, she didn't win, and apparently now this week she says she's not going to run again ever. Thank you. But but again, these are like, they have the evidence there, and I think what supporters of the Trump administration are waiting for, people in this room probably included, okay, let's see some of that information released. You said you were going to release the information on the Obama administration, whether he is a citizen, or some of those documents. I think that you're going to see, as the media continues to push on Donald Trump, he is going to eventually get the people in place, and he's going to push back. Yeah. Well, yeah, you just need to go to the NSA. But that's part of the swamp. And they probably are holding information on a lot of different people. And, they politely go to people and, do you want to see this on the front page of the paper? Do you need me to send over the TV media?
But this is also when they assert the law. We are not authorized to spy on American citizens, and we will not release that information, even if we had it. When you interviewed CIA, same sort of thing. They wrote back and said, we're not allowed to do that. Well, that's not an answer to the question. The question was, do you have that information? We're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, so that's
Hillary, Comey came up and he said she was guilty of 1,001 things, but then he wasn't going to prosecute. Why did the Trump administration say, we're not going to look into this?
I don't think that, I think that, again, that they're so overwhelmed. You got to think that, President Trump has never been a politician. He has no idea what to expect, and right now he's got all of these slings and arrows coming at them. But I do think that, eventually he'll get down to it when he needs to get something done. Perhaps he's waiting till the next election. Maybe he thinks that it's a better time to bring it up right before the election. I mean, that could be a question as well.
One last.
I think there's a possibility that there are some of the good people in the FBI, because I think there are many.
Yeah. Oh,
who are
absolutely.
Sitting on information, just waiting to kind of let it go, and let it go, and let it go, and bring these things out.
Let's hope so. I
Let's
mean, and
see,
of
well-
course there are FBI agents out there that are, public servants and great people. In fact, the majority of them probably are. So let's not, we want to make sure that we support, our law enforcement as well. And,
Use the example of Syracuse.
yeah.
What happened there?
Well, and typically, if you're an FBI agent or a CIA agent, there was a gentleman, Mr. Carrico, he actually had information that the CIA was bugging the Gitmo attorneys representing the defendants, and he went forward with that information, and he received 3 years in jail. So, there are systems in place for whistleblowing, and whistleblowing, they're supposed to be protected because you're doing this to put things out there that are against the law. And if you don't have those actions in place, and right now we don't. People are afraid to, whether, it's a tough economy, maybe they won't get their pension, and they're looking at their family saying, I better just sit on it and not say anything. So there are a lot of things that go into that. Last question?
Two issues I can't seem to get any answers to. Bergdahl and Chelsea Manning.
Oh, boy, okay. Well, with Bergdahl, I think he's, I think he's clearly, that was a really good deal for the Taliban. There's a lot of reporting, but the minute you start talking about things like this, and I don't know, I won't speak to the Chelsea Manning side of it, but with Bergdahl, that you're labeled, myself included, they'll label you a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, well, of course, that's what journalists are supposed to do. We're supposed to investigate these things to determine. I will tell you that it really deflated the military to see that this guy they traded everybody for, and the lives that were lost on the ground. And, again, you have to question why President Obama did this. And, apparently he was a nice guy and he decided to write that off this day. No.
Let me just mention one thing on Bergdahl. The Army did recommend court-martial and jail for him, but it's a political decision above that. So we can't fault the Army on that.
Yeah.
Say again? The last decision is always political.
The last decision is always political. And when you look at this, this is another thing about the staffing with the Trump administration. All the generals and admirals our political appointees. And so far, Trump really hasn't asked for all their resignations like he did with the attorney generals across the country. And he needs to do that because those generals and admirals they actually have a lot of allegiances to President Obama. And you have to remember, again, also the NSA has something on everybody, whether it's implied or otherwise. And a lot of these people can be saying, look, you're either going to stick with me on this or I'm going to go to the media and release this information. That's how powerful, that's why the NSA needs to be, scaled back, because the implications is it comes down to politics, and now they're using this as a political weapon.
That's the real fear of the deep state, that they're able to manipulate political issues without any electoral control. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, dear.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's just so much information.
This wonderful presentation concludes our meeting. Thank you for coming. Oh, Mary Ann has more heart buttons. More of these. Go see Mary Ann to get her button.